Welcome to Noir Street. Like, subscribe, and stay with the mystery. Tell me, which part of the world are you watching from?
Chapter 1. The Doctor Who Arrived Too Soon. The trouble began at 11 minutes past 9 on a Thursday evening, which was a time when Nero Wolfe preferred the world to leave him alone. Dinner had ended 40 minutes earlier. Wolfe sat behind his desk with his eyes closed, listening to a string quartet and moving one finger in time with the music. I was at my desk pretending to read the late mail. Fritz was in the kitchen. Theodore was upstairs with the orchids. And the brownstone on West 35th Street had settled into its usual evening peace. Then the telephone rang. I let it ring twice before answering. Nero Wolfe's office. Archie Goodwin speaking, a nervous male voice said. I must speak to Mr. Wolfe immediately. That puts you in a crowded field. Who are you? My name is Martin Vale. I am private secretary to Edward Lawson. That made the call worth hearing. Edward Lawson was one of those industrialists whose name appeared in newspapers beside words like expansion, dispute, inquiry, and donation. He owned Lawson Metals, several factories, 2 country houses, and enough enemies to require a filing system. What does Mr. Lawson want? He has been attacked, the music ended. Wolfe opened his eyes. Attacked how? I asked. He was found unconscious in his study. Dr. Andrew Hale is with him now. The police are on their way. Mr. Lawson spoke for only a few seconds and said, Get Nero Wolfe. Wolfe made a small motion for me to continue. Who found him? His daughter, Caroline. When? About 15 minutes ago. Who is in the house? Miss Lawson, her brother Philip, Mrs. Ruth Mercer, Mr. Jonathan Reed, Miss Evelyn Grant, Dr. Hale, 2 servants, and myself. Put Dr. Hale on. There was a pause. Then a deeper voice came over the wire. This is Andrew Hale. Archie Goodwin. What happened to Lawson? He has received a severe blow to the back of the skull. There may also be cardiac or respiratory failure. Poison? I did not say poison. You thought it. I am trying to save a man, Mr. Goodwin. Where were you when he was found? I had just arrived. At what time? About 9. Where from? The Ambrose Foundation charity dinner at the Churchill Hotel. You came directly from the hotel? Yes. What time did you leave? Approximately 8:40. And arrived around 9? Yes. The Churchill is on 52nd Street. What took 20 minutes? Traffic. You drove? A cab. Did anyone see you arrive? I did not stop to arrange witnesses. Wolfe held out a hand. I gave him the receiver. This is Nero Wolfe. If Mr. Lawson dies before the police arrive, do not permit the body to be moved. Hale's tone sharpened. I am familiar with proper procedure. Then follow it. Mr. Goodwin and I are coming. Wolfe hung up. I looked at him. You said we are coming. I heard. Myself. You also once said you would never enter Lawson's house again. That statement was made before he requested my services while dying. He hasn't hired you. A dying man who summons me displays judgment. It should not be ignored. 10 minutes later, we were in the sedan heading north. Wolfe sat beside me in his heavy overcoat, displeased by the road, the weather, and probably my driving. What interested you? I asked. Dr. Hale's coat. You haven't seen it? I heard it. That is a new trick. He emphasized that he had come from a formal dinner. The clothing supports the statement before the facts do. Therefore, the clothing may be intended as testimony. So a man wearing evening clothes is suspicious? No. A man using them as an alibi is. The Lawson house stood on East 68th Street, a large grey structure with polished brass, tall windows, and the expression of a banker refusing credit. 2 police cars were outside. A crowd had already collected across the street. Inspector Kramer met us in the entrance hall. He removed his cigar when he saw Wolfe. Who called you? Edward Lawson. He is unconscious. He was not always so. Kramer looked at me. His secretary called, I said. Lawson asked for Wolfe before collapsing. That all he said? That's all we were told. A thin man in a dinner jacket hurried toward us. Mr. Wolfe? Martin Vale. Where is Mr. Lawson? Wolfe asked. Vale looked at Kramer. Kramer said, Dead, 3 minutes ago. Wolfe's eyes closed briefly. He had not liked Lawson, but he disliked clients dying before financial arrangements were settled. Who pronounced him dead? "Dr. Hale, take me to the study," Kramer growled but led the way. The study was large, overheated, and lined with books that looked untouched. A fire burned in a marble fireplace. Edward Lawson lay on the carpet beside a broad desk. Blood darkened the white hair at the back of his skull. Near his hand lay a bronze horse with a stained base. Dr. Andrew Hale stood by the fireplace. He was tall, silver at the temples, and handsome in a careful, professional way. His evening clothes were exact. His white shirt front was smooth, his tie perfectly shaped, and his black evening coat fitted him too well to be cheap. He was still wearing it. The room was warm enough to grow orchids. But Hale had not removed his coat, Wolfe noticed. "So did I." Kramer said, "Doctor, this is Nero Wolfe." "By reputation," Hale replied. Wolfe moved closer. "You arrived before Mr. Lawson was found?" "Yes, I was speaking with Mr. Vale in the hall when Miss Lawson cried out." Vale said, "The hall clock struck 9 while we were speaking." Hale glanced at him. "Possibly. You came from the Churchill Hotel?" Wolfe asked. "Yes, directly." "Yes? You received a message there?" "My answering service contacted the hotel." "A waiter brought the message to my table. What did it say?" "That Edward Lawson had chest pain and required me urgently." "Who sent it?" "I do not know. You left immediately?" "At about 8:40. You took a cab?" "Yes." Wolfe looked down at Hale's coat. Near the right hem were 3 narrow dark streaks. They were not easy to see, but once noticed they looked deliberate. "What marked your coat?" Wolfe asked. Hale looked down. "Street dirt. The streets are dry. There may have been water at the curb." "Those marks are not water." Kramer stepped nearer. "What are they?" "Coal dust," Wolfe said. Hale gave a short laugh. "That is absurd. There are no coal furnaces at the Churchill Hotel. This house uses oil heat. A taxicab does not normally contain coal bins." "I brushed against something." "What?" "I do not know. You were in a hotel, a taxicab, and this house. Which one?" Hale's mouth tightened. "I am a physician, not a clothing expert." "No, you are a physician wearing evidence," Kramer said. "Take off the coat." "Am I under arrest?" "No, remove it." Hale hesitated, then slipped it off. The dark lining had a pale, powdery mark near the inner pocket. Lower down, something white clung to a seam. Kramer used the point of a pencil to dislodge it into an envelope. It was a tiny fragment of plaster, green on one side. Wolfe said, "Coal dust outside. Broken painted plaster inside. Not a hotel cloakroom." Hale's expression hardened. "I stopped at my surgery," Vale stared. "You said you came directly from the dinner." "I had forgotten," I said. "That must have been a dull visit." Hale ignored me. "I went for my medical bag." A black leather bag stood on a chair beside the desk. Wolfe asked, "How long were you there?" 5 minutes. "What time?" "Approximately 8:45. Was anyone present?" "No. Why did you deny the stop?" "It seemed unimportant." "You stated twice that you came directly from the hotel." "I was under pressure." Kramer motioned to a detective. "Check the office, the building, and the cab companies." Hale's eyes followed the detective. Wolfe turned toward Lawson's body. The dead man's right hand was extended. The fingers curved as if they had released something. "Was anything taken from that hand?" Wolfe asked. "No," Kramer said. I crouched without touching. A short piece of black thread lay partly hidden under Lawson's index finger. A detective lifted it with tweezers. Wolfe looked at Hale's coat. The silk facing on the left sleeve had a loosened stitch near the cuff. Hale saw the comparison. "Lawson may have grabbed my sleeve while I treated him." "You said he was unconscious." Wolfe replied, "A patient may move without awareness, did he?" "I do not know." A woman appeared in the doorway. "Andrew." She was around 30, tall and fair, wearing a silver evening gown. Her face was pale but controlled. A younger man stood behind her, broad-shouldered and uneasy. She saw the body. "My father is dead." Kramer nodded. "Yes, Miss Lawson." She closed her eyes, then opened them and looked at Wolfe. "You are Nero Wolfe." "Yes." "He asked for you." Kramer turned sharply. "You heard him?" "Yes." "You told me he was unconscious." "He was." Then his eyes opened for a moment. "What exactly did he say?" She looked at Hale. He said, "Too soon." Then he said, "The doctor came too soon." "Get Wolfe." Hale's face changed. Only slightly, but enough. Kramer said, "What did he mean?" "I don't know." Hale spoke calmly. "A severe head injury can cause meaningless speech." Wolfe asked Caroline, When did your father summon Dr. Hale? He did not, Hale frowned. Someone in this house did. My father had no chest pain. I spoke with him at 8:30. He was angry, but he was not ill. Angry about what? Kramer asked. Caroline looked at her brother. The younger man said, "Don't, Caroline," she ignored him. Father said he had discovered that someone had been stealing from Lawson Metals. Who? He would not tell me. He ordered all of us to come here after the charity dinner. Wolfe asked, "Was Dr. Hale invited?" "No," Hale said. "I came because of an urgent medical message." "From a man who was not ill," Wolfe said. Kramer turned to the medical examiner. "You mentioned possible poisoning." The examiner nodded. There was unusual blueness around the lips and a faint medicinal odor. Wolfe looked at Hale's medical bag. "What did you administer?" "A stimulant." "By injection?" "Yes." "Who saw it?" "Miss Lawson." Caroline shook her head. "I saw you use a syringe. I did not see what was in it." The examiner opened the bag with gloved hands. Inside were bottles, instruments, gauze, and a metal case with 2 ampules. He held it up. "This case was made for 3. One compartment is unused," Hale said. "Was it unused when you left your surgery?" "I do not remember." Kramer's face reddened. "You went there specifically for the bag, but you don't know what was in it." "I did not count every item. Wolfe said to me, 'Telephone Saul Panzer. Send him to Dr. Hale's surgery immediately.'" Kramer objected. "My men will handle it." "Then Saul will observe how they handle it." Kramer glared but allowed the call Philip Lawson. The younger man had been watching Hale. He said, "You should tell them." Caroline turned. "Tell them what?" Philip looked at Kramer. "Hale and my sister intended to marry." Caroline's face tightened. Hale said, "This is not relevant." "It was relevant to father," Philip replied. "He said he would disinherit her." "Why?" Kramer asked. Philip looked directly at Hale. "Because father had discovered something about him." Caroline said, "Father hated anyone he could not control." That was not all. He said Hale's reputation was built on a grave. The polished confidence left Hale's face. Kramer saw it. "What grave?" Hale folded his coat over a chair before answering. 20 years ago, a patient died during an operation I performed. There was an inquiry. I was cleared. Patient's name? Robert Lawson. Caroline stared. "My uncle?" "Yes." Edward Lawson's younger brother had died after surgery 2 decades earlier. The newspapers had called it a tragic complication. Apparently, Edward Lawson had never accepted that explanation. Wolfe asked, "Did Lawson summon you tonight to discuss his brother's death?" "No." "Did you know he had reopened the matter?" "Yes, someone at the hospital archives told me he had requested the old records. Did those records endanger you?" "No." "Then why are you frightened?" Hale looked at Wolfe. "Because I understand how this appears." "No," Wolfe said. "You understand only part of it." He pointed toward the coat. "The coal dust is mixed with red grit. The plaster fragment is painted dark green. That combination exists in the lower service passage of Lawson Metals Warehouse No. 3. Kramer stared. "How do you know?" "Mr. Lawson consulted me 3 years ago about theft from that warehouse. Mr. Goodwin inspected the building." Kramer looked at me. "The lower passage has coal bins and green walls," I said. "Or it did then." Wolfe faced Hale. "You were at that warehouse tonight." "No." The denial came too slowly. Wolfe said, "Then someone wearing your coat was there." A detective entered carrying a small evidence bag. Inside it was a brass key attached to black thread. "Found under Lawson's shoulder," he said. Martin Vale made a sound. Kramer turned. "You recognize it?" Vale swallowed. "It opens the private records room at warehouse No. 3. Caroline looked at Hale. "Andrew?" He said nothing. Kramer stepped forward. "Doctor, you're coming downtown." Wolfe raised a hand. "Do not arrest him yet." Kramer swung around. "You just proved he lied." "I proved his coat was at the warehouse." "That is not the same thing." "He was wearing it, indeed, but the evidence against him is too generous. Coal dust, plaster, torn thread, a missing ampule, and a key beneath the victim. It resembles luggage packed for a journey. You think he is being framed. I think someone expected him to be accused." The telephone rang. A detective answered, listened, then handed the receiver to Kramer. Kramer spoke briefly and hung up. "They found blood in Hale's surgery," he said. "A smear near the back stairs. They also found black silk caught on a nail in the basement. Everyone looked at the torn sleeve. Kramer said, "Still too much evidence." "Yes," Wolfe replied. Kramer pointed at Hale. "Take him." The detectives moved. Wolfe said, "Dr. Hale, what time did you first enter warehouse number 3? Hale stopped at 7:10. The room went silent. Caroline whispered, "You were there?" "Yes." Kramer stepped close. "Why?" "Edward Lawson sent me a note asking me to meet him. He said he had discovered the truth about his brother's death." "And was Lawson there?" "No." "What was there?" Hale looked at the brass key. A dead woman. Kramer's expression changed. "Who was she?" "I do not know." "She was lying in the records room. There was blood on her face. I checked for a pulse. Why didn't you call the police?" "Because beside her body was a surgical knife." "What about it?" "It belonged to me. It was used during Robert Lawson's operation 20 years ago." No one spoke for several seconds. Hale continued. "Then I heard someone in the passage. The lights went out. I left through the basement stairs. That is where my coat tore. You went to dinner afterward." "Yes, you said nothing." "I believe someone was arranging evidence against me. I intended to speak to Lawson after the dinner. Then the medical message came. And you came here." "Yes?" Wolfe asked. "The woman's body was still there when you left?" "Yes." Kramer began giving orders. Detectives rushed from the room to search the warehouse. Hale was taken away. Caroline followed until an officer stopped her. When the room had quieted, Kramer faced Wolfe. "You believe him?" "I believe a woman was in that warehouse." "You think she's still there?" "No." "Why not?" "Because the warehouse scene was prepared to be discovered at a chosen time. Dr. Hale arrived before that time." Kramer looked toward Lawson's body. "And Lawson?" "The same plan required Dr. Hale to arrive here after Lawson was dead. But he arrived before 9. "Yes." Wolfe looked at the bronze horse. "The torn thread and the black coat. That is why Lawson said the doctor came too soon." I said, "Too soon for the murderer." "Precisely." Kramer put on his hat. "I am going to the warehouse." Wolfe turned toward the door. "We are returning home." I stared at him. "Now we have work. We must learn who knew Hale had been summoned to the warehouse, who could enter his surgery, who sent the false medical call, and who expected him to reach this house after 9. On the desk stood a silver-framed photograph of Edward Lawson with 3 younger men. One was Dr. Hale, one was Robert Lawson. The face of the third had been violently scratched away. Below the picture was a small engraved plate, Halcyon Medical Group, 1936. Wolfe read it twice. "Someone has waited 20 years for this evening," he said. "Dr. Hale arrived too soon, Edward Lawson died too late, and a woman was killed at exactly the proper moment. Outside, a police car raced east toward the river. Somewhere in an abandoned warehouse, detectives were searching for a dead woman who might already be gone. Somewhere else, a murderer knew that Nero Wolfe had entered the case, and in the study behind us, Edward Lawson lay beside his desk, with blood in his hair and 3 final words that had turned an elegant evening coat into the first witness. The doctor had arrived too soon. The question was whether he had arrived soon enough to save himself. Chapter 2. The Coat. That had already traveled at 8 the next morning. Wolfe was in the plant rooms with 10,000 orchids, Theodore Horseman, and no intention of discussing murder. His schedule gave the orchids 2 hours every morning and 2 more every afternoon. And a corpse could wait unless it had learned to bloom. I had already been awake for an hour, which was unnecessary but profitable. Inspector Kramer had telephoned at 7:20 to report that the police had searched Lawson Metals Warehouse number 3. They had found blood in the private records room, marks showing that a body had been dragged through the lower passage, and 1 pearl button under a filing cabinet. They had not found the dead woman. Dr. Andrew Hale was still being questioned downtown. The medical examiner had not yet identified the substance in Edward Lawson's blood. Kramer had ended the call by saying that if Wolfe knew something useful, he should try the revolutionary experiment of sharing it. At 9 sharp, Wolfe came down from the plant rooms, entered the office, and settled behind his desk. Fritz brought beer. I gave Wolfe the report while he examined the foam. "The warehouse was cleaned badly," I said. "Blood in the records room, drag marks, no body." "A pearl button." "They found Hale's old surgical knife in a drain behind the building." "Predictable," Wolfe said. "Kramer thinks it is persuasive. Mr. Kramer respects quantity." He also checked Hale's surgery. The blood there was animal blood. Wolfe lowered the glass. What animal? Rabbit. Pfui. The black silk on the basement nail matches Hale's coat. That part is genuine. Of course, I leaned back. You are acting as though someone gave you the answers with breakfast. No, someone has given us a question. We must earn the answers. Which question? When did the coat visit the warehouse? I frowned. Hale said 7:10. He said he arrived there at 7:10. That does not establish when the coat acquired the marks. He was wearing it, so he says. He admitted being at the warehouse. He admitted it only after denial became useless. A man may confess one fact to protect another. I looked at him. You think he went there earlier? I think his coat did. That was enough to send me out. The Ambrose Foundation dinner had been held at the Churchill Hotel, a respectable stone tower on 52nd Street, where the carpets were thick. The waiters were discreet, and the management regarded mud as a personal insult. The banquet manager, Mr. Lionel Sykes, received me in an office containing 3 telephones, 4 calendars, and no visible sign of pleasure. I have already spoken to the police, he said. I am more entertaining. That remains to be established. I need Dr. Hale's movements before and during the dinner. Sykes folded his hands. Dr. Hale arrived shortly after 7:30. The reception began at 7. Dinner was served at 8. You saw him arrive? I saw him enter the ballroom. Wearing his evening coat? No. Guests leave outer garments at the cloakroom. So you saw a dinner jacket, not a coat. He considered that. Correct. When did he leave? Shortly after receiving a message. Around 8:40. Did he collect his coat? Naturally. Was anything unusual about it? Not that I observed. Did you observe it? No. Sykes had reached the limit of his generosity, so I thanked him and found the cloakroom. The attendant was a woman named Nora Bell, middle-aged, sharp-eyed, and offended that anyone had misplaced a claim ticket during her shift. Dr. Hale, she said. Tall, grey at the temples, black evening coat. That's the one. He arrived before the crowd. Gave me the coat himself. What time? 7:20, perhaps 7:25. Was it clean? She looked at me. Why? Because it later had coal dust, red grit, and green plaster on it. Her eyebrows rose. Not when he gave it to me. You are certain? I brush coats when needed. His did not need brushing. No mud. No. Nothing on the sleeves. No, that was inconvenient. I asked if anyone else could have handled the coat. Only me and Mr. Parsons. Who is Parsons? Night porter. He helps during large functions. Where can I find him? At home asleep unless his wife has changed the rules. She gave me an address in Hell's Kitchen. Before leaving, I asked to see the cloakroom arrangement. The guests' coats had hung on brass rails behind a polished counter. A narrow service door led to a corridor used by staff. Anyone in the corridor could enter if the door was unlocked. Was it locked last night? Nora hesitated. Usually, that is not an answer. Mr. Parsons opened it twice to bring empty hangers. Could someone have entered? Not without being noticed. By whom? Me. Were you there every minute? She did not like that. I took one break. When? About 8:10. How long? 5 minutes. Who covered for you? Mr. Parsons. I thanked her again and went to find Mr. Parsons. He lived on West 47th Street in a building that had survived several attempts to improve the neighborhood. His wife opened the door, looked me over, and decided I was probably not selling anything useful. Parsons appeared in shirt sleeves, with a long face and the exhausted expression of a man whose profession required him to be polite at night. Told the police everything, he said. You told them Hale arrived at 7:20. That sounds right. You helped in the cloakroom? For a few minutes. Did you touch Hale's coat? I may have. Did you notice mud? No. Coal dust? No. Green plaster? No. He rubbed his chin. Then he said, there was something on one sleeve. What? I thought it was mud, but Miss Bell had brushed it. Which sleeve? The right, near the elbow. What time did you see it? Before she brushed it. My pulse improved. You just said she gave you no coat with mud. I did not say she gave it to me. I saw the doctor outside. Outside where? At the hotel service entrance. What time? Parsons looked toward the bedroom as if his wife might keep the clock there. About 6:30. That was nearly an hour before Hale had officially arrived. What was he doing at the service entrance? Speaking to a man beside a car. What kind of car? Dark sedan, expensive. Who was the man? I could not see his face. He stayed behind the open door. Was Hale wearing the evening coat? Yes. And there was mud on the sleeve? Mud or something dark. Both sleeves, now that I think of it. The right was worse. Why didn't you tell the police? They asked when he entered the hotel, not whether I saw him outside. Witnesses are like safes. The right combination matters. Did Hale enter through the service door? No, he got into the car. Which direction did it go? East. Did you see the license plate? No. Anything else? Parsons frowned. The doctor seemed angry. How angry? He struck the roof of the car with his hand before getting in. Did the man inside say anything? I heard only 2 words. What words? Not here, I repeated them. Parsons nodded. That's what he said. Not here. By 11:30 I'd spoken to a doorman, a kitchen porter, 2 parking attendants, a florist, and a woman who sold newspapers across from the hotel. The doorman remembered Hale arriving through the main entrance at 7:23, dressed properly and without visible mud. The newspaper seller remembered a tall man in evening clothes crossing 52nd Street shortly before 7, but could not swear it was. Hale? One parking attendant remembered. Nothing except a generous tip from a judge. The second attendant, a young man named Benny Cross, remembered the coat. I parked a grey Packard for him, Benny said. For Dr. Hale. No, for another gentleman. Doctor came out of it. When? A little after 6. Where? At the private garage behind the Churchill. What did Hale look like? Like he had walked through a ditch. That was the sentence I had been waiting for. Describe it. His shoes had mud on them. Not city mud either. Thick brown stuff. His coat sleeves were dirty and there was a streak across the back. Did he enter the hotel? No, he went down the alley and came back 10 minutes later in a cab. Still wearing the coat. Yes. Who owned the Packard? Benny became cautious. I don't remember. You remembered the mud. Mud is free. Names cost trouble. I gave him $20, which improved his courage. The car belonged to Edward Lawson. I kept my face quiet. Who drove it? Mr. Lawson's secretary. The thin fellow. Martin Vale. That's him. Was Lawson in the car? I didn't see him. Anyone else? A woman in the back. Can you describe her? Dark hat, veil, light-colored gloves. That's all. Did Hale speak to her? He bent toward the open door. She gave him something. What? A flat package. Maybe papers. Then? He put it inside his coat. Did he seem surprised? He looked mad. Then the car left. Which direction? West toward the river road, I corrected him. The river is west. That's what I said. I asked why he had forgotten all this when the police questioned him. They asked about cars arriving for the charity dinner. Lawson's car came before the dinner. It was the second time that morning a witness had explained the police to me. I telephoned. Wolfe from a drugstore booth. He listened without interrupting. Hale was wearing the coat at 6:15, I said. He arrived in Lawson's Packard with Vale driving and an unidentified woman in the rear. He was muddy. She handed him a packet. 40 minutes later, Parsons saw Hale near the Churchill service entrance with another dark sedan. Hale got in after someone said, "Not here." By 7:23 he entered the hotel clean, and the cloakroom attendant says the coat had been brushed. Where was it brushed? She says she did it. Before or after Hale entered? She claims after. Claims? She also claimed it was clean when she received it. Parsons remembers mud near the elbow before she brushed it. Bring both of them this afternoon. Wolfe. Nora Bell will not enjoy that. Neither. Will I bring them? I returned to the Churchill before lunch and asked Nora directly whether Hale had requested special attention for the coat. Her lips tightened. He asked me to brush the sleeves. Why didn't you say so? Because it did not seem important. That phrase is having a successful week. He said he had splashed mud while getting out of a cab. Was the mud fresh? Yes. What color? Brown with red specks. Any coal dust? Not that I noticed. Green plaster? No. Did Hale leave anything in the coat pockets? She thought. Air-sealed envelope. Did he remove it? No, a man collected it. What man? Mr. Vale. When? About 7:50. That stopped me. Vale entered the cloakroom. He showed me Dr. Hale's claim ticket. Did Hale give it to him? I assume so. Did Vale take the coat? No, he reached into the inside pocket and removed the envelope. You allowed that? He said Dr. Hale had sent him. What happened to the envelope? He put it inside his jacket. Did anyone else touch the coat? Not that I saw. During your break? Her face changed. Mr. Parsons covered for me. At 8:10? Yes. Was the coat still there when you returned? Yes. Same position? She looked toward the brass rail. I believe so. Belief is what people use when memory has gone out for coffee. At 4 that afternoon, Nora, Bell and Parsons sat in the office on the red leather chairs. Wolfe was behind his desk and I was at mine. Fritz had served coffee, which Nora accepted and Parsons declined. Wolfe questioned them separately and then together. Nora insisted Hale's coat had remained in the cloakroom from 7:20 until 8:40. Parsons admitted leaving the room for perhaps 2 minutes during Nora's break to assist a drunken guest. Then the coat was unattended. Wolfe said, "For 2 minutes," Parsons replied. "Long enough to remove it. Why would anyone?" Wolfe closed his eyes. "That is the question you were not invited to answer." Nora said, "It was on the rail when I returned. Did you inspect it?" "No." "Then you cannot say it had not been removed." She stiffened. "I run a proper cloakroom." "Madam, propriety does not defeat arithmetic. After they left, I gave Wolfe the rest. Benny says Hale arrived muddy in Lawson's car around 6:15. Vale was driving. A veiled woman gave Hale a packet. Later, Vale removed an envelope from Hale's coat. Someone may have taken the coat during Nora's break. Wolfe drank beer. I waited. Finally, he said, "The police assume the evening coat confirms that Dr. Hale came from the charity dinner to Lawson's house." It doesn't. No. The coat had already traveled before the dinner began. It visited at least one place where there was mud, and perhaps the warehouse. Hale admitted the warehouse at 7:10. He lied. About the time? Certainly. The warehouse is on the East River. He could not leave the Churchill district after 6:30, reach the warehouse, discover a body, flee, return, clean himself, and enter the hotel at 7:23 unless every street cleared for him. So he was at the warehouse before 6. Or the coat was. I leaned forward. So I still separate Hale from the coat. I separate facts from garments. He tapped one finger on the desk. The mud on the sleeves was visible at 6:15. By 7:20 it had been brushed. Yet coal dust and green plaster were present when Hale reached Lawson's house at 9. Therefore those marks were acquired after the coat entered the Churchill cloakroom. During Nora's break. Possibly. Someone took Hale's coat out, went to the warehouse and returned it in less than 5 minutes. Wolfe glared at me. "Do not be witless. I was hoping you would repair it. The coat need not have gone far during those minutes. It may have been exchanged." "With what?" "With another identical coat." I stared at him. "Hale's coat was expensive and fitted," I said. "You noticed that? An identical coat need not fit perfectly in a cloakroom. It need only hang unseen. Then the coat Hale wore to Lawson's house was not the coat he brought to the dinner? That is one possibility. And the exchanged coat had already been to the warehouse. Yes, why? To place the warehouse upon Dr. Hale's body without placing Dr. Hale at the warehouse. At the required time, I got up and walked to the window. Then Hale lied about going. There at 7:10 because he had gone. Earlier, probably. With the veiled woman? Perhaps. And Vale knew. Undoubtedly. So why did Vale remove the envelope from Hale's coat? Wolfe looked at the beer bottle as if it had asked a better question. The envelope may have contained the reason Edward Lawson died. The telephone rang. I answered. Kramer's voice said, "We identified the pearl button from the warehouse." "Congratulations. It came from a woman's evening glove, custom-made. The customer was Caroline Lawson." I looked at Wolfe. Kramer continued, "And we found a witness who saw Caroline near the warehouse at 5:40 yesterday. Alive or dead? Very funny. She's on her way downtown," I told Wolfe. He shut his eyes. "Caroline Lawson," I said. "The woman in the car?" "Possibly." She gave Hale the packet. "Vale drove them." Hale had mud on his coat. Then Vale removed an envelope from the pocket. "Yes. Do we tell Kramer about Benny?" "Not yet. He will be touched by our confidence. He is rarely improved by emotion." Wolfe rang for Fritz. When Fritz entered, Wolfe ordered another bottle of beer and then looked at me. "Archie, bring Martin Vale here tonight, voluntarily, if possible, and if not. Inform him that the police will soon learn he drove Dr. Hale and Caroline Lawson from a place neither has admitted visiting." "Which place?" Wolfe leaned back. "The one that stained the coat before the dinner. Mr. Vale will supply the name. At the door I stopped. You know, don't you? I know only that the evening coat is not merely evidence. It is a timetable. A timetable for what? For 3 journeys. The first was concealed, the second was invented, and the third ended beside Edward Lawson's body. He lifted his glass. Fine, Mr. Vale. Until we know where the coat travelled before 6:30, we do not know where this murder began. Chapter 3. The House Beyond the River Martin. Vale did not come willingly. He arrived at the brownstone at 9:15 that evening, with Inspector Kramer beside him, and an expression suggesting that each blamed the other for the arrangement. Wolfe had finished dinner and was behind his desk with beer. I was at mine. Caroline Lawson had been taken downtown for questioning, Dr. Hale was still detained, and the missing woman from the warehouse remained missing. Vale sat in the red leather chair and crossed one thin leg over the other. I have already answered the police. Wolfe regarded him. Badly, Kramer growled. Get on with it. Wolfe asked, Where did you drive Dr. Hale yesterday before the charity dinner? Vale's face remained still. I did not drive him anywhere. I placed Benny Cross's signed statement on the desk. That parking attendant has a better memory than your alibi, I said. He saw you driving Lawson's Packard. Hale got out wearing a muddy evening coat. A veiled woman was in the rear seat. Vale looked at the paper but did not touch it. Kramer said, Was the woman Caroline Lawson? No, the answer came too quickly. Wolfe's brows rose. Then you know who she was. Vale closed his mouth. Kramer leaned forward. Talk. Vale looked from him to Wolfe. It was not Miss Lawson. Who? Wolfe asked. I do not know her name. You drove an unknown woman through New York? She was already in the car when Mr. Lawson instructed me to collect Dr. Hale. Where did you collect him? Vale hesitated. Wolfe said, The mud will tell us. Your silence merely wastes time. Vale uncrossed his legs. There is a cottage beyond the Hudson. North of Fort Lee, it belonged to Samuel Grant. Kramer's cigar stopped halfway to his mouth. Grant, he said. Lawson's old partner? Yes. Samuel Grant had been accused of stealing nearly $500,000 from an early Lawson company. Before he could be arrested, he disappeared. Lawson took control of the business. Grant's name became shorthand for betrayal, and the case went cold. Wolfe asked, Why did Lawson send Hale there? I was not told. Mr. Lawson gave me the address and ordered me to drive. Was Lawson at the cottage? No. Who was? The woman. And Dr. Hale. I collected him near his surgery at 5:30. We crossed the river and reached the cottage shortly after 6. What happened? Vale rubbed his hands together. The woman waited inside. Dr. Hale entered alone. He remained there 15 minutes. When he came out, his clothes were muddy. He was angry and demanded to know who had arranged the meeting. What did the woman give him? A packet of papers. Did you see them? No. Why did you later remove an envelope from his coat at the Churchill? Vale looked sharply at me. I smiled. Cloakroom attendants notice more than surgeons. Vale's face tightened. Mr. Lawson ordered me to retrieve it. How did he know Hale had it? He telephoned me at the hotel. From where? His house. At what time? About 7:40. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Lawson knew Dr. Hale had received papers at the cottage, yet he was not present. I cannot explain that. Did you deliver the envelope to Lawson? Yes. When? 8:10. I left the hotel briefly and took a cab to his house. Kramer stared. You were at Lawson's house 40 minutes before the murder. I gave the envelope to him at the door. He told me to return to the dinner. Who saw you? The butler. Wolfe asked. What was in the envelope? I do not know. Did Lawson open it? Not in front of me. Who was the woman at the cottage? Vale swallowed. She called herself Anna Grant. Kramer stood. Samuel Grant's daughter died 15 years ago. That is what I thought. Wolfe's fingers pressed against the arm of his chair. Describe her. About 40. Dark hair, thin face. She wore a veil most of the time. Had you seen her before? No. Did Dr. Hale recognize her? I believe he did. Why? He said, you should be dead. The room became quiet. Kramer turned toward me. We're going to the cottage. Wolfe said, Archie will go. Kramer looked at him. You are not running this. No, I am avoiding mud. An hour later, I was driving north with Kramer beside me and Sergeant Pearlie Stebbins in the rear. Kramer had brought a warrant, 2 detectives and enough resentment to warm the car. The cottage stood at the end of a narrow road beyond the river, hidden behind bare trees and tangled brush. It was a low stone house with a sagging roof, shuttered windows, and a narrow path descending toward the black water. The ground was soft from old rain. Before entering, I looked at the mud. It was thick brown clay mixed with red gravel, the same color Nora Bell had brushed from Hale's coat. The front door was locked, but one of Kramer's men opened it, without damaging anything except his pride. The air inside smelled of damp wood and cold ashes. The cottage had 3 rooms downstairs. Dust covered most surfaces, but not all. Fresh footprints crossed the floor from the rear door to the fireplace. One set was narrow, probably a woman's. Another was larger and deep at the heel. A third set showed only partial marks, as if the person had wrapped cloth around the shoes. Kramer crouched near them. Hale? His shoes can be compared, Stebbins said. The fireplace contained grey ashes with black centers. They were not old. I held my hand above them and felt no heat, but a detective stirred them and found charred paper beneath. On one fragment we could read part of a printed heading. Halcyon Medical Group. Kramer looked at me. That name again. On a table near the window stood a metal medical case. It was open and empty except for cotton, 2 glass ampules, and a folded surgical cloth. I had seen an identical case in Hale's medical bag. Stebbins picked up 1 ampule with gloved fingers. No label. I examined the cotton. It carried a faint bitter odor, the same medicinal smell I remembered from Lawson's study. Upstairs we found 1 bedroom. The mattress had been used recently. A water glass stood on the floor. Beside it was a woman's hairpin and a strip of white bandage stained with dried blood. The second room had been an office. A desk stood beneath the window, its drawers forced open. On the wall hung a faded photograph of Edward Lawson and Samuel Grant in front of a factory, both young, smiling, and apparently still capable of a trust someone had scratched. Lawson's face. Behind the desk I found a torn piece of black silk. It matched Hale's coat. Kramer held it up in an evidence envelope. That puts him here. He admitted coming, I said. He admitted coming at 7:10. Vale puts him here after 6. And the coat may have returned without him. Kramer turned. You've been listening to Wolfe too long. Some habits are expensive to break. At the rear of the house, a path led down to a small landing. Fresh grooves marked the mud, as if something heavy had been dragged toward the river. There were no tracks. Returning, a detective found a pearl-colored button near the water. It matched. The button from the warehouse. Kramer stared at it. The same woman was here and at the warehouse. Or someone wanted the same woman. Connected to both, the river gave us no body. Police boats searched until after midnight, but found only driftwood and 1 abandoned fishing net. I returned to West 35th Street at 1:10. Wolfe was still in the office, which meant the case had offended him personally. Fritz brought me coffee and sandwiches while I reported. The cottage belonged to Samuel Grant, I said. Fresh footprints, recent fire. Halcyon papers burned in the grate. Medical supplies matching Hale's, blood on a bandage, black silk from the coat, and another pearl button. Something heavy was dragged into the river. Wolfe listened with his eyes closed. The mud matches the stains Nora brushed from Hale's sleeves, I continued. Vale says Hale met a woman calling herself Anna Grant. Hale told her she should be dead. She gave him papers. Vale later took them from Hale's coat and delivered them to Lawson. Was the cottage searched before Hale arrived? Yes, desk drawers forced open. The fire? Used within hours. Footprints? 3 sets. Wolfe opened his eyes. Dr. Hale was not summoned there merely to receive papers. What else? To identify someone. The woman. Perhaps. Or a patient. There was no patient. There were medical supplies, blood, a used bed, and a doctor summoned secretly. That is enough to suggest one. I ate half a sandwich. You think someone was being treated at the cottage? Yes. Samuel Grant? He would be nearly 70. Alive. Possibly. I put the cup down, then the vanished. Partner may have returned after 20 years. Or someone wishes us to believe he did. Wolfe leaned back. The coat now connects 3 places: the cottage, the warehouse, and Lawson's study. At each location it carries evidence more neatly than a messenger. So the coat was planted again? Not necessarily. Dr. Hale wore it to the cottage. Someone later used it to connect him to the warehouse. Why would Hale hide the cottage? Because he recognized the woman. treated someone there or learned something in the papers that could destroy him. And Lawson? He obtained those papers at 8:10. Less than an hour later he was murdered. I looked toward the dark windows. What was in them? Wolfe's lips pressed together. The truth about Robert Lawson's operation, Samuel Grant's disappearance, and the Halcyon Medical Group. 3 events believed separate. You think they are one event. I think Edward Lawson did. The telephone rang, I answered. Kramer said, the lab checked the blood on the bandage. It is human, male. Blood type matches Edward Lawson. I looked at Wolfe. Lawson's blood was at the cottage. Wolfe sat motionless. Kramer continued. And one more thing. We found a photograph hidden under the cottage floorboard. Lawson, Grant, Hale, and another doctor. Name on the back is Dr. Peter Mercer. I repeated it. Wolfe's eyes opened fully. Ruth Mercer, Edward Lawson's sister, had been in the house on the night of the murder. Peter Mercer, Wolfe said. Her husband. Dead 18 years, Kramer added over the telephone. Suicide. When I hung up, Wolfe reached for the bell to summon Fritz. Another beer? I asked. No, Mr. Vale. At this hour? At once. What do you want from him? Wolfe looked at the notes on my desk. Edward Lawson's blood was in a cottage he supposedly never visited. Dr. Hale lied about when he went there. A woman used the name of Samuel Grant's dead daughter. Medical supplies linked the cottage to Lawson's death. He tapped the desk once. Someone did not merely revive an old scandal, Archie. Someone gathered its survivors in one place, and Lawson was the first to die. No, Wolfe said. The missing woman was first. Unless she is not dead. Outside, the city had grown quiet. Beyond the river, police lights moved among the trees around Samuel Grant's abandoned cottage. The elegant coat had led us there, but the mud on its sleeves was no longer the important stain. Edward Lawson's blood was Chapter 4, the patient, who never existed at 9 the next morning. Wolfe was upstairs with the orchids, where murder was permitted only if it could be discussed without disturbing the humidity. I was in the office with Inspector Kramer on the telephone. We checked Hale's story, he said. He told my men he treated an emergency patient before the dinner. That is newer than his other stories. He claims a man came to his surgery shortly after 5 with chest pain and dizziness. No name. Convenient. No admission record. No ambulance, no nurse. No receptionist, nothing. What does Hale say? That the patient refused hospitalization and left. Did the patient also refuse to exist? Kramer ignored that. We found missing pages in Hale's appointment book. 3 pages removed from yesterday afternoon and evening. Cut or torn. Removed cleanly. By whom? Hale admits doing it. That improved the morning. At 9 sharp, Wolfe descended, arranged himself behind his desk, and accepted beer from Fritz. I gave him Kramer's. News. Wolfe looked at the foam. Dr. Hale has now supplied us with a patient. A patient no one saw. Then he has supplied us with a fiction. He says the man arrived alone at 5:20, complained of chest pain, refused an ambulance, and left at 5:40, before Mr. Vale collected Hale for the cottage. Exactly. Where did Hale claim the examination occurred? At his surgery. Go there, I sighed. Before breakfast settles? Your digestion is not the center of this inquiry. Hale's surgery occupied the 2nd floor of a respectable building on East 58th Street. Kramer had sealed the private office, but the receptionist, Susan Pike, was waiting in the outer room with Sergeant Stebbins. Susan Pike was 30, efficient, and angry enough to be useful. Dr. Hale dismissed us at 4 yesterday, she said. Us? His nurse and me. Why? He said he expected no more patients. Did he mention an emergency case? No. Did anyone arrive after 4? I was gone. What about the appointment book? Her expression changed. He keeps it on my desk. Were pages missing when you left? No. You are certain? I entered Friday's appointments before leaving. The pages were there. Stebbins opened the desk drawer and produced the book in an evidence sleeve. 3 sheets had been cut close to the binding. Could Hale have removed them without your noticing? I asked, certainly. But he had no reason. People usually acquire reasons before destroying records. She looked toward the inner office. There was one unusual appointment. What name? Peter Morgan. The name meant nothing. What time? 5 o'clock. Was he a patient? I had never heard of him. Who made the appointment? Dr. Hale himself. He wrote it in 2 days ago. Did he give an address? No. Telephone number? No. Was the appointment on one of the missing pages? Yes, I looked at Stebbins. He said, "She never told us that." You asked about emergency patients, Susan replied. Peter Morgan was an appointment. Questions again. Always questions. Did Hale know anyone named Morgan? She hesitated. Years ago he worked with a Dr. Peter Mercer. That name was no longer nothing. Peter Mercer had belonged to the Halcyon Medical Group. He had married Ruth Lawson, Edward's sister, and later killed himself. Did Hale ever refer to Mercer as Morgan? No. Did the man arrive? Susan looked annoyed. I told you. I left at 4. The rear stairwell carried the faint smell of disinfectant and old stone. The nail that had torn Hale's coat was still marked with black silk. Near the bottom step, I found a second scrape on the wall, recent and narrow, as though a metal case had struck it. In the basement, the superintendent showed me a side door opening into an alley. Was it used yesterday? I asked. Dr. Hale came through around 5. Alone? He went in alone. Did he leave alone? The superintendent scratched his cheek. I saw him later with another man. What time? Maybe 5:30. Describe him. Older, grey coat. Hat low. Walked badly. Did Hale support him? No, the man carried a cane. Did they speak? Not where I could hear. Which way did they go? To a dark car waiting at the corner. Driver? Thin fellow, Martin Vale. That put Hale, an unknown older man, and Vale together shortly before the trip to the cottage. I telephoned Wolfe. There was a real visitor, I said, but not an emergency patient. Hale had written Peter Morgan into the schedule, then removed the page. The superintendent saw Hale leave with an older man carrying a cane. Vale's car was waiting. Did the man resemble Edward Lawson? No description good enough. Samuel Grant? Possibly. Or Peter Mercer? Mercer has been dead 18 years, so the records state. I waited. Wolfe said, "Return home." When I arrived, Kramer was already in the office. He had brought Dr. Hale. Hale looked tired, but remained composed. He sat in the red leather chair with his hands on his knees. Wolfe asked, "Who was Peter Morgan?" "No one." "Then why did you place him in your appointment book?" Hale said nothing. "Why did you remove the pages?" "They contained confidential medical information about a patient who never existed." Hale's eyes moved toward Kramer. Kramer said, "Answer him." Hale leaned back. "The man who came to my surgery was not a patient." "Who was he?" Wolfe asked. "I cannot say. Cannot or will not. Both." "Did you take him to Samuel Grant's cottage?" "Yes." That was the first clean answer Hale had given us. "Was he the person treated there?" "No." "Then who required the medical supplies?" Hale's jaw tightened. Wolfe continued. "You invented an emergency patient to account for the period between 5 and 6. You removed the appointment pages to conceal the visitor's name. You then traveled with him and Mr. Vale to the cottage." "Yes." "Was the visitor Samuel Grant?" Hale looked directly at Wolfe. "No." "Peter Mercer?" Hale's face did not move, but his hands did. Kramer saw it. "Mercer is dead," he said. Hale answered quietly. "I signed the death certificate." The office became silent. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. "Did you lie on it?" Hale stood. "I have answered enough." Kramer pushed him back into the chair. Wolfe said, "No, doctor. You have answered only the question you wished us to ask." Hale looked at him. "The imaginary patient did not conceal a medical emergency," Wolfe continued. "He concealed a meeting. You expected a man whose name could not appear in your records. You removed the pages before anyone knew Lawson would die, so the secrecy concerned an older crime." Hale said nothing. "Edward Lawson's blood was found at the cottage. Medical supplies identical to yours were there. A photograph linked Lawson, Grant, you, and Mercer. Therefore the meeting concerned Halcyon." Still no answer. Wolfe leaned forward. "You did not invent a patient to protect yourself from a murder accusation. You invented him to protect a living man officially declared dead." Hale's face emptied. Kramer stared. "Peter Mercer?" I asked. Hale closed his eyes. That was answer enough. Wolfe settled back. 18 years ago, Dr. Peter Mercer was reported to have taken his own life. Yesterday, an elderly man using a cane entered your surgery under the name Peter Morgan. You removed the appointment pages, took him to Samuel Grant's cottage, and later lied about an emergency patient. Kramer's voice was low. "Mercer is alive." Hale opened his eyes. "He was alive yesterday afternoon. Where is he now?" "I do not know." Why did Lawson have blood at the cottage? Hale looked toward Wolfe. Because Edward Lawson was there before I arrived. The room tightened. You saw him? Kramer demanded. No, Mercer told me. What happened? He would not say. Only that Lawson had discovered the truth and intended to expose everyone connected with Halcyon. Wolfe said. Including you. Yes. Grant? Yes. Mercer? Yes. And the woman calling herself Anna Grant. Hale's expression darkened. She was not Anna Grant. Who was she? Before Hale could answer, the telephone rang. I picked it. Up it was Stebbins. They had found the missing woman. Her body had surfaced near a river pier north of the cottage. In her coat pocket was a hospital identification card. The name on it was Margaret Mercer. Peter, Mercer's daughter. I repeated it. Hale lowered his head. Wolfe looked at him for a long moment. The patient never existed, he said. But the dead man did. Outside, the city moved through an ordinary morning, unaware that a physician had erased 3 pages to hide a man buried 18 years before. The murder had begun to reach backward, and every step led deeper into Halcyon. Chapter 5. The prescription without a name, Inspector. Kramer arrived at the brownstone shortly before noon carrying an evidence envelope, and the expression of a man who had discovered something useful, but resented having to share it. Wolfe had just returned from the plant rooms. He was behind his desk with a bottle of beer, while I was reading the preliminary report on Margaret Mercer's body. She had drowned, but not where she had been found. There was a deep wound above her left ear, probably caused before she entered the water. Mud from Samuel Grant's cottage clung to her shoes, and one glove was missing 2 pearl buttons. The medical examiner estimated her death between 6:30 and 7:30. On the evening Lawson was murdered, Kramer dropped the envelope on Wolfe's desk, found in Lawson's private safe. Wolfe looked at it but did not reach for it. What is it? A prescription. Then take it to a pharmacy. Kramer removed his cigar. Sometimes I wonder why I come here. Habit is often stronger than judgment. Kramer opened the envelope and slid out a square sheet of heavy paper. It bore the printed heading of Dr. Andrew Hale's private practice. The writing beneath it was firm and slanted. There was no patient's name, no date, no signature, only the name of a drug, a dosage and instructions for 3 administrations over a period of 2 hours. I read it upside down. Cardiostadine, I said. I never take anything with more than 4 syllables. Kramer looked at me. You don't need medicine. You need supervision. Wolfe said. Dr. Hale wrote it? Handwriting experts say yes. Hale admits it is his writing, but claims he does not remember writing the prescription. Convenient. He also says the dosage makes no sense. In what way? For a sick patient, it is too small. For a healthy man, it could be dangerous. Wolfe's eyes moved to the instructions. What effect? Kramer took a folded report from his pocket. The lab says cardiostadine slows the heartbeat and lowers blood pressure. In the amounts written there, it would not usually kill a healthy adult. It could cause weakness, shallow breathing, confusion, and a pulse so faint that a careless examination might mistake the person for dying. Or dead, I asked. Kramer looked at Wolfe. That depends on the examiner. Wolfe closed his eyes. For nearly a minute, no one spoke. Kramer paced to the bookshelves and back. I studied the prescription. The 3 doses were marked 40 minutes apart. The final notation read, "Observe before transfer." I tapped it. That doesn't sound like ordinary treatment. No, Wolfe said. It sounds like preparation. Kramer stopped pacing. For what? Wolfe opened his eyes. A performance, Kramer grunted. You think Lawson took this? The autopsy will tell us. It already has. Traces of cardiostadine were found in his blood. That changed the room, I said. So Hale prescribed the drug found in Lawson. Kramer nodded. And Hale injected him after arriving, I added. He claims the injection contained a stimulant. The syringe did contain a stimulant, but the medical examiner says Lawson had already received cardiostadine before Hale reached the house. Wolfe's gaze sharpened. At what time? They can't give an exact minute. Probably between 7:30 and 8:30, before Lawson was struck. Possibly. Was the blow sufficient to kill him? No, serious, but not immediately. Fatal. Wolfe leaned back. Then the blow was not the principal. Method. Kramer's face reddened. A fractured skull is usually considered principal, not when the victim has first been chemically weakened, and the murderer depends upon a particular medical conclusion. What conclusion? That Edward Lawson was dying from the blow. Kramer stared at him. I said, the drug slowed the heartbeat. The blow supplied the visible cause. Hale arrived, saw an injured man with a weak pulse, and treated what looked like head trauma. Wolfe nodded. And if Dr. Hale had arrived at the expected time, Mr. Lawson might already have appeared dead. Kramer put the cigar back into his mouth without lighting it. That fits the last words, I said. The doctor came too soon. Precisely, Kramer turned toward Wolfe. You were saying the killer wanted Hale to pronounce Lawson dead? Or to begin treatment under conditions arranged to incriminate him, with Hale's prescription in Lawson's safe and Hale's drug in Lawson's. Blood? Yes. Then Hale wrote the murder plan. Perhaps without knowing it. Kramer gave him a hard look. That needs improvement. Wolfe pointed to the unnamed paper. Why is there no patient's name? Hale says he doesn't remember. I did not ask what he says. Kramer sat down. Wolfe continued. A physician may omit a name when making a private note, when preparing instructions for another doctor, or when he wishes the paper to be used by more than one person. The dosage is designed not to cure disease, but to produce a temporary condition. Someone asked Dr. Hale how to slow a healthy heartbeat without causing immediate death. Kramer's eyes narrowed, and he answered. He wrote the answer. Why? That is what Mr. Goodwin will discover. I looked at Wolfe. Thank you for including me. He ignored that. Archie, return to Dr. Hale's surgery. Examine his correspondence, discarded notes, prescription records, and telephone messages for the past month. You are looking for an inquiry concerning simulated heart failure, transport of a fragile patient, or controlled reduction of pulse. With Kramer's permission, Kramer said, Stebbins will go with you. Then I'll have someone to carry the drawers. Hale's surgery was still sealed. Susan Pike sat at the reception desk, now less angry and more frightened. Sergeant Stebbins unlocked the private office and warned me not to touch anything without gloves. The prescription ledger contained no entry for cardiostadine. During the past 6 months, the wastebasket had been emptied before the murder. The desk drawers held bills, correspondence, medical journals, and several invitations Hale had not answered. The telephone message book was more useful. 3 weeks earlier, someone identified only as Mr. Grant had called twice. The first message read, wishes information regarding temporary cardiac suppression during surgery. Says matter concerns old Halcyon case. The second read, requests written dosage. Will collect personally. No telephone discussion. I showed it to Stebbins. Samuel Grant, he asked, or someone using his name. Susan Pike looked over from the reception desk. I remember those calls. Did Hale return them? No, he became angry when he saw the name. Did anyone collect a paper? She thought. A woman came 2 days later, Margaret Mercer. I had never seen her before. I showed her the photograph Kramer had given me. Susan studied it and nodded. That is the woman. What happened? She said Dr. Hale had prepared a medical memorandum for her father. He came out of his office, gave her a sealed envelope, and told her never to contact him again. Did he call her by name? No. Did she mention her father? She said he cannot remain hidden much longer. Did Hale answer? He said, then let him face what he did. There it was. The anonymous prescription had not been written for Edward Lawson. It had been given to Margaret Mercer for someone else. I telephoned Wolfe. He listened while I read the messages and Susan's account. The paper was collected by Margaret, I finished. She said it was for her father. Peter Mercer, Wolfe said, apparently. Was it the original prescription? Probably. But the one in Lawson's safe is also original paper with Hale's handwriting. Then either Margaret returned it to Lawson, or Lawson obtained it from Mercer. What was Mercer planning to do with it? Wolfe's voice became impatient. That question is premature. Learn whether Dr. Hale had previously used cardiostadine in connection with Halcyon. The hospital archives occupied 2 basement rooms where old files went to become dust. A records clerk named Albert Moss found the Halcyon surgical logs after Stebbins displayed authority. And I displayed patience. Cardiostadine appeared in one case. 20 years earlier, the patient was Robert. Lawson, the medication record. stated that 3 measured doses had been administered before surgery to control an irregular heartbeat. Dr. Andrew Hale had ordered them. Dr. Peter Mercer had recorded the pulse. The timing matched the anonymous prescription exactly. 40 minutes between doses. 3 administrations observed before transfer. Dice. Read the page twice. Robert Lawson wasn't healthy. Stebbins said. No, but someone copied his old treatment. In another file, we found a handwritten note signed by Peter Mercer. Pulse nearly undetectable after final dose. Transfer delayed. Dr. Hale notified. The next page had been removed. I took the findings back to the brownstone. Kramer had brought Hale there again. The doctor sat rigidly in the red leather chair. Wolfe placed the unnamed prescription beside a copy of Robert Lawson's old medication record. They are identical, Wolfe said. Hale looked at them and said nothing. You wrote this prescription for Margaret Mercer? Yes. For her father? Yes. Why did Peter Mercer want the same dosage used before Robert Lawson's fatal operation? Hale's face tightened. He said he needed to prove what had happened by repeating it. He claimed the drug had not killed Robert. Did you believe him? I knew the dosage would not kill a healthy man. Wolfe leaned forward. But it could make him appear near death. Yes, Kramer said. What was Mercer planning? Hale looked toward the floor. He wanted to stage his own collapse. Why? To force Edward Lawson to confess. Kramer's cigar moved. Confess to what? Hale raised his head. To murdering his brother. The silence lasted several seconds. I said, You signed Robert Lawson's surgical record. I signed what I was told had happened. Robert's pulse had weakened after the medication. During transfer, he was left alone briefly. When we returned, he was dead. What killed him? Wolfe asked. I believed it was cardiac failure. And now? Hale's voice dropped. Peter Mercer later claimed he saw Edward Lawson enter the room during that interval. Kramer stood. Why didn't Mercer tell the police? He was already involved in falsifying halcyon accounts with Samuel Grant. Lawson threatened to expose them. Mercer signed the death record and stayed silent. Wolfe looked at the prescription. 20 years later, Mercer intended to reproduce Robert's weakened pulse, confront Lawson, and make him believe another death had occurred. Yes, but Lawson obtained the prescription. I don't know how. Margaret gave it to him, I said. Or he took it from her. Wolfe shook his head. No, Lawson kept it in his safe because he understood its significance. Someone then used the same dosage on him. Kramer said, Mercer. Perhaps. Hale? No, Hale looked at Wolfe. You are certain? No, but the prescription was concealed among Lawson's papers, not destroyed. A murderer who wished merely to kill would not preserve a document pointing to the drug. It was intended to be found. To frame Hale, I said, and to revive Robert Lawson's death. Wolfe tapped the paper. This is not simply a prescription. It is a script. 20 years ago, the drug prepared one Lawson for death. Last night it prepared another. Kramer frowned. But who gave Edward the doses? Wolfe looked at Hale, someone he trusted enough to accept medicine from. Hale's eyes moved toward the photograph of Margaret Mercer. She was a nurse, he said quietly. Kramer stared. At Halcyon? No, later. She trained after her father disappeared. Then she could have administered it. She could. But she was dead before Lawson died. I said. Wolfe's gaze settled on the anonymous prescription. Exactly. He leaned back and closed his eyes. The woman who could explain the medicine was killed first. The man who recognized its purpose was killed second. Dr. Hale was arranged to arrive at the moment when his knowledge would become evidence against him. I looked at the 2 matching dosage schedules, separated by 20 years. The violence in Lawson's study had been loud, visible, and misleading. The real weapon had been written quietly on a blank prescription, without a date, a signature, or a patient's name. Chapter 6. The Witness. Hidden in plain sight. The name Peter Collins reached us through a bookseller's receipt found in the pocket of Margaret Mercer's coat. The receipt was damp, torn across one corner, and dated 3 days before her death. It came from a shop called the Nero located in a quiet street near the River Road north of Fort Lee. The purchase consisted of a railway guide, a medical dictionary, and a used history of Lawson. Metals Inspector Kramer considered the receipt a dead end. Wolfe. considered Kramer's opinion an encouragement. At 10 the next morning I crossed the river again. The narrow shelf occupied the ground floor of a narrow brick building between a bakery and a watch repair shop. Its front window displayed old books in careful rows, each one apparently selected for its ability to discourage customers. Inside, the air smelled of paper, dust, and coal heat. Peter Collins stood behind the counter. He was a quiet man of about 55, with thin grey hair, round spectacles and ink stains on 2 fingers. He looked like someone who had spent years apologizing to books whenever he sold one. I placed the receipt on the counter. Margaret, Mercer bought these from you. His eyes moved to the paper and then away. I sell many books. Not many customers buy a medical dictionary and a corporate history together. I do not ask why people read. That is probably why you have survived as a bookseller. His hands folded. I have nothing to say. That is different from having nothing to know. He looked toward the front window. I continued, Margaret Mercer is dead. Edward Lawson is dead. Dr. Andrew Hale is being treated as a murderer. Your name is connected to a cottage where all 3 crossed paths. Collins removed his spectacles and polished them with a cloth. I never met Edward Lawson. I didn't say you did. His hand stopped. That was not a confession, but it had good posture. Mr. Collins, did you see Dr. Hale at Samuel Grant's cottage? No. Did you see someone with him? No. Did anyone warn you not to talk? He put the spectacles back on. I think you should leave. The front door opened behind me. A customer entered, saw us, and decided against literature. When the door closed, I leaned on the counter. You have a choice. You can tell me what frightened you, or you can tell Inspector Kramer after he arrives with men who will search every room and ask the same questions louder. Collins swallowed. I received letters. What kind? Anonymous. What did they say? That I had seen nothing near the cottage. That if I spoke, my shop would burn. How many? 3. When did the first arrive? The morning after Mr. Lawson died. Where are they? I burned 2. And the third? He hesitated, then reached beneath the counter and produced a small envelope. The message inside had been typed on plain paper. The river hides what men forget. Speak of the old man and you will lose more than books. There was no signature. Folded it back into the envelope. What old man? Collins sat on a stool. His resistance had not vanished, but fear had finally decided I was less dangerous than silence. 3 evenings ago, he said, I closed the shop at 6. I drove north to deliver books to a customer. On the return journey, I stopped near the Grant cottage because my engine overheated. What time? About 6:20. That was the evening of Lawson's murder. Yes. What did you see? A dark car stood near the cottage road. Mr. Vale was beside it. You know Martin Vale? He purchased books for Mr. Lawson. Who else? A physician came out of the trees. Dr. Hale? I recognized him from newspaper photographs. Was he alone? Collins looked down at his hands. No. Who was with him? An elderly man. Describe him. Tall once, but bent now. White hair. Heavy cane. His left leg dragged. He wore a grey coat and a broad hat. Did Hale assist him? The doctor held his arm while they crossed the mud. Did you hear anything? The old man was angry. He said, Lawson will not bury me twice. I kept my voice even. Did Hale use his name? Yes. Collins took a breath. He called him Samuel. That was the reason for the threats. Samuel Grant had disappeared nearly 20 years earlier after Edward Lawson accused him of financial fraud. The official story had turned him into a thief who fled before arrest. If Collins was right, the thief had returned alive. What happened next? Mr. Vale opened the rear door. A woman was already inside the car, Margaret Mercer. I cannot be certain. She wore a dark veil. Did Grant enter the car? Yes, Dr. Hale sat beside him. Where did they go? Toward the river crossing. Did you enter the cottage? No. Then how did the people sending the threat know you had seen them? I asked the wrong person about Samuel Grant. Who? Collins looked toward the bakery wall as if it could hear. Jonathan Reed. Lawson's attorney had attended the charity dinner and had been in Lawson's house the night of the murder. Why Reed? He came into my shop the following morning. He asked whether anyone had recently bought books about Lawson metals. Margaret Mercer had. Yes, did you tell him? I said a woman had purchased one. Then I asked if Samuel Grant was still alive. What did Reed do? He stared at me. He asked where I had heard the name. And you told him about the cottage. Only that I had seen an elderly man with Dr. Hale. When did the first threat arrive? 2 hours after Reed left. I telephoned Wolfe from the shop. He listened without interruption. Bring Mr. Collins, he said. He is frightened. He should be. Bring him. Collins protested until I explained that remaining in the shop made him easier to find than coming with me. That appealed to his practical side. We reached West 35th Street shortly after noon. Wolfe was behind his desk. Kramer stood near the globe, and Jonathan Reed sat in the red leather chair. Reed was a compact man in his early 60s, with silver hair, a dark suit, and the composed face of an attorney who believed every sentence should first be reviewed by counsel. When Collins entered, Reed's expression did not change. Only his right hand tightened on the arm of the chair. Wolfe noticed. Mr. Collins, Wolfe said, repeat what you told Mr. Goodwin. Collins did so quietly and without decoration. He described Hale Vale, the veiled woman, and the elderly man called Samuel. When he reached the anonymous threats, Kramer turned toward Reed. You visited his shop? Reed nodded. I was tracing Lawson's private inquiries. Why didn't you tell us? I did not consider it significant. I said, that phrase should be licensed. Kramer ignored me. Did you send the threats? No. Did you tell anyone what Collins saw? Reed folded his hands. I may have mentioned it to Mrs. Ruth Mercer. Why? She had asked whether Margaret had visited the area. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. You informed Mrs. Mercer that a witness had seen Samuel Grant alive. I said only that an elderly man had been seen with Dr. Hale. Did she know Grant was alive? I cannot say. Can you say whether you knew? Reed met Wolfe's gaze. I believed he might be. Since when? For 18 years. Kramer stepped forward. You knew Grant was alive all that time? I suspected it. On what basis? Reed reached into his inner pocket, then stopped when Kramer's hand moved. It is only a letter. He produced a yellowed envelope. Kramer took it and passed it to Wolfe. The letter was dated 17 years earlier. It contained 4 lines. Edward has made the account serve his story. I will remain dead until I can prove it. Mercer knows the truth. Hale knows enough to fear it. Keep this letter or destroy it, but do not answer. It was signed Samuel Grant. Wolfe read it twice. Why preserve this? He asked. Protection. Against Lawson. Against everyone. Did Edward Lawson know you had it? No. Did Margaret Mercer? Yes. Did she ask for it? 3 weeks ago. Did you give it to her? No. Why? Because she said her father intended to confront Lawson. I advised caution. Kramer said, her father, Peter Mercer. Reed nodded. Alive too. I learned that only recently. Wolfe leaned back. The vanished partner and the dead physician were both alive. Edward Lawson had concealed one man's survival and benefited from another man's disappearance. Reed said, that is not proved. No, but it is now probable. Wolfe looked at Collins. When you saw Samuel Grant leave the cottage, did he carry anything? Collins thought, a leather case, and what kind? Old brown leather with brass corners. Reed's composure broke. It lasted only a moment, but everyone saw it. Wolfe turned to him. You recognize the case. Reed did not answer. Kramer said, talk. Reed's face had gone pale. It belonged to the Halcyon Medical Group. What was inside? The original partnership ledgers. Wolfe's fingers pressed against the chair arms. Lawson Metals ledgers. Earlier than that? Halcyon was not only a medical partnership. Lawson, Grant, Mercer, and Hale used it to manage investments for wealthy patients. Money was transferred through false medical trusts, and Robert Lawson discovered it. I said. Reed nodded slowly. He threatened to expose them, then died during surgery. Kramer said, yes. Wolfe looked at the letter. Again. Samuel Grant possessed. Proof that Edward Lawson altered the accounts and blamed him for the missing money. Yes. And Peter Mercer possessed proof concerning Robert Lawson's death. Yes. Margaret brought them together. Reed lowered his head. I believe so. The telephone rang. I answered. Sergeant, Stebbins was calling from the Lawson house. The private records room had been searched during the night. Nothing appeared stolen except a brown leather case with brass corners. I repeated it. Wolfe closed his eyes. Who had access? Kramer asked into the receiver after taking it from me. He listened, then hung up. The family veil Reed, and the servants. Reed said nothing. Wolfe opened his eyes. Samuel Grant carried the halcyon ledgers from the cottage. Someone later took them from Lawson's house. Grant may have taken them himself, Kramer said. No, Mr. Collins saw him leaving with them before Lawson died. Lawson then obtained Hale's prescription and the papers, delivered by Vale. The survivors of Halcyon were gathering evidence for a confrontation, and somebody killed Margaret and Lawson. To stop it, I said, or to control it. Wolfe looked at Collins. The threats were not intended merely to conceal Samuel Grant's survival. They were intended to keep us from learning that he possessed the ledgers. Kramer frowned. If Grant had proof, why hide for 20 years? Because proof is not protection when the accused man owns companies, newspapers, lawyers, and public respect. Reed's eyes moved away. Wolfe noticed that too. Samuel Grant survived his disgrace, Wolfe continued. Peter Mercer survived his death. Dr. Hale protected both secrets. Margaret Mercer tried to bring the truth into daylight, and now she is dead, Collins whispered. Yes. The bookseller looked smaller in the red chair. Wolfe turned to me. Archie, find Samuel Grant. Where? He has lost the cottage, the ledgers, and his daughter's protection. He will seek the only person he believes still owes him something. Hale? No. Wolfe's gaze settled on Jonathan Reed, his lawyer. Reed stood. Abruptly, I am not Grant's lawyer. Wolfe's expression did not change. Then, why have you kept his letter for 17 years? No one answered. Outside, a truck passed along West 35th Street, shaking the windows. Samuel Grant had been hidden for nearly 2 decades behind a fraud accusation, a vanished partnership, and a story written by Edward Lawson. Now a frightened bookseller had placed him back among the living, and somewhere in New York, an old man with a cane carried enough truth to ruin every survivor of Halcyon. Chapter 7. The Ledger Beneath. The floorboard Samuel Grant had not gone to Jonathan Reed. That was the conclusion after 6 hours of police searches, telephone calls, and one unpleasant interview during which Reed admitted keeping Grant's old letter, but denied knowing where the old man had hidden after leaving the Riverside cottage. Inspector Kramer believed him. Wolfe did not. Mr. Reed knows more than he has said. Wolfe told me the following morning, but not enough to be useful. That sounds uncomfortable. It should. Wolfe sat behind his desk with his eyes closed while I finished breakfast coffee. The anonymous threats to Peter Collins had been typed on a common machine. The brown leather case had vanished from Lawson's house. Samuel Grant, Peter Mercer, and the Halcyon records were still missing. Kramer had searched the cottage once. His men had searched it again. Wolfe wanted me to search it properly. What exactly did the police miss? I asked. If I knew you could remain here, that would be a refreshing method. Wolfe opened his eyes. Samuel Grant lived as a fugitive for nearly 20 years. A man who distrusts banks, attorneys, partners, and the police does not place all his protection in one portable case. You think he left something behind. I think he left what he could not risk, carrying. By 10:30 I was beyond the river again. 2 uniformed officers guarded the cottage. One of them recognized me and said the place had already been examined from roof to cellar. I'm here to inspect the space between them, I told him. The cottage looked worse in daylight. Police boots had disturbed the mud. Furniture had been moved and every drawer had been emptied. The fireplace ashes were bagged. The medical supplies were gone. Evidence labels marked the blood-stained bandage, the silk from Hale's coat, and the scratches where the desk had been forced. I began upstairs. The bedroom floor creaked unevenly near the window. That meant little in a house old enough to complain about weather, but one board moved differently from the others. I knelt and examined the nails. 3 were rusted. The 4th was new. It took 10 minutes. A screwdriver, and language Wolfe would not have approved of. Beneath the board was a shallow cavity wrapped in oilcloth. Inside lay a narrow black ledger. It was not the brown leather case Peter Collins had seen Samuel Grant carrying. This book was older, smaller, and worn soft at the corners. On the cover in faded gold letters were the words, Halcyon Private Accounts. The first pages contained ordinary-looking entries, dates, initials, investment amounts, and percentages. Then the figures changed. Money deposited for medical trusts had been transferred into temporary holding companies.
Those companies purchased land, machinery, and industrial patents. Profits returned under different names. Losses remained attached to the original investors, the initials repeated throughout ELSGPMAH. Edward Lawson, Samuel Grant, Peter Mercer, Andrew Hale. But the entries did not treat them equally. Lawson approved transfers. Grant maintained the accounts. Mercer arranged medical trusts. Hale delivered sealed documents and carried instructions between the partners. Beside many of Hale's initials appeared phrases such as messenger only, no financial authority, not informed of total amount. That did not make him innocent, but it made him something other than the architect. Near the center of the book, the entries became more direct. EL ordered transfer without Grant's approval. Funds moved to Lawson Industrial Holdings. Mercer objects but will remain silent if Robert matter contained. Then, Robert discovered duplicate accounts. Threatened disclosure after operation. The next page had a dark stain across the lower corner. Hale delivered final meeting notice. All present except Grant. Below it, written in a different hand, Robert died before speaking. EL assumed control. I read that line 3 times. The ledger did not explicitly say Edward Lawson had murdered his brother. It did prove that Robert Lawson had discovered the stolen investments and died before exposing them. It also proved Lawson benefited immediately afterward. The final section had been written years later. Samuel Grant had added notes describing how Lawson altered records, shifted missing funds into Grant's name, and threatened Peter Mercer with prosecution for falsified death documents. One entry was dated only 4 weeks earlier. Margaret has found Mercer. Hale agrees to carry messages once more. Reed refuses direct involvement. Lawson must be confronted before records disappear, then 2 days before the murder. Meeting arranged at cottage. Hale to bring Mercer. Margaret to bring prescription and Lawson correspondence. Leather case contains originals. Black ledger remains hidden. That explained why Grant had carried the brown case openly. It held the papers intended for the confrontation. The ledger beneath the floor was his insurance. I telephoned Wolfe from the cottage. I found it, I said. What? A ledger under the upstairs floorboards. It documents the Halcyon thefts. Lawson moved investment money into his own companies and blamed Grant. Mercer helped manage the trusts. Hale delivered messages but apparently had no authority over the money. Does it mention Robert Lawson? Yes. Robert discovered the accounts and planned to expose them after surgery. He died first. Anything concerning the recent meeting? Margaret found Mercer. Hale agreed to serve as messenger again. Grant hid this ledger and carried the original papers in the leather case. Wolfe was silent. What does that tell you? I asked. That Dr. Hale was chosen for the same reason twice. Which reason? He could travel among respectable men without attracting suspicion. I looked at the initials on the page. A doctor carrying sealed envelopes looks ordinary. Precisely. Hale was not trusted with decisions. He was trusted with movement and saw every participant. Yes, when I returned to the brownstone, Kramer was waiting in the office with Dr. Hale and Jonathan Reed. The ledger lay open on Wolfe's desk. Hale studied it with a face that had lost much of its professional calm. Wolfe said, "You carried messages for Halcyon, occasionally. For years, I did not understand the financial arrangements. The ledger supports that. It repeatedly identifies you as messenger only." Kramer grunted. "That doesn't clear him." "No," Wolfe said. "It makes his position more dangerous." Hale looked at him. Wolfe continued. "You delivered meeting instructions, sealed statements, medical records, and account summaries. You knew where the partners met when they quarreled and who feared whom. I knew fragments. You knew enough to recognize Samuel Grant after 20 years. Yes, you knew Peter Mercer was alive. Yes. You knew Margaret intended to confront Lawson. Yes, and you wrote the prescription she carried." Hale lowered his gaze. Reed said, "Then Hale could have arranged everything." Wolfe turned toward him. No. A mastermind controls information. Dr. Hale merely transported it. His knowledge was broad but incomplete. That is why he lied badly. He possesses pieces without understanding the design. Kramer tapped the ledger. 2 trusted associates helped Lawson steal the money. Grant and Mercer. No, Wolfe said. The ledger names 2 others who continued profiting after Grant disappeared. He turned several pages and pointed to repeated initials, JRRM, Jonathan Reed, Ruth Mercer. Reed's face tightened. Hale stared at him. Wolfe said, Mr. Reed provided legal structures for Lawson's holding companies. Mrs. Mercer inherited her husband's hidden interest and continued receiving payments after his supposed death. Kramer rose. Reed said quickly, Those initials prove nothing. They prove motive, Wolfe replied. Not murder, I asked. Where is the brown leather case? Wolfe looked at Reed. That is the question frightening everyone. Hale stood abruptly. If the case still contains the original death record, Peter Mercer will be killed for it. Kramer pushed him back into the chair. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Not merely Mercer. Samuel Grant, too. Then we must find them, Hale said. We will. How? Wolfe closed the ledger. The murderer has spent 20 years believing Samuel Grant possessed the only complete record. This book proves otherwise. When its discovery becomes known, the murderer must either flee or recover it. Kramer looked at him. You want to use it as bait. I intend to use the truth. It is usually more attractive. He turned to me. Archie, telephone Peter Collins. Tell him Samuel Grant's hidden ledger has been found. That will spread fast. It must. And then invite Dr. Hale, Mr. Reed, Mrs. Mercer, Mr. Vale, and Inspector Kramer here tomorrow evening. Kramer scowled. I'm already here. Tomorrow you may be useful. I looked at the black ledger. It had survived beneath the floorboards while men disappeared. Reputations hardened, and murder waited for another opportunity. Dr. Hale had not created the secret empire of Halcyon. He had merely walked through every door it used, and that made him the only living witness who had seen the whole conspiracy move. Chapter 8. The coat that could not be cleaned when a murderer makes one mistake. The police celebrate when he makes none. Nero Wolfe begins examining laundry. That observation occurred to me shortly after 9 on the morning, following the discovery of Samuel Grant's hidden ledger. Dr. Andrew Hale remained under police supervision. Jonathan Reed was attempting to appear unconcerned, and somewhere in the city both Samuel Grant and Peter Mercer had vanished again. The only object that had faithfully accompanied nearly every important event was still resting inside the police laboratory, the black evening coat. Inspector Kramer met me there with the expression of a man who hoped science would accomplish what detectives had not. The laboratory has finished, he said. Will they finally tell us whether the coat committed murder? They'll tell us something. The chief forensic examiner, Dr. Eleanor Briggs, placed the evening coat across a long white examination table. At first glance, it appeared perfectly clean. Hale had obviously brushed it carefully after his arrest. Only the torn silk near the right sleeve and a faint discoloration along the hem hinted that it had recently traveled somewhere less respectable than a charity banquet. Dr. Briggs adjusted her spectacles. Cleaning removed the surface dirt, she said. It did not remove what entered the cloth itself. She produced several enlarged photographs. Under magnification, the black wool looked like a forest. Tiny gray particles clung between individual fibers. Fine reddish grains rested beneath the stitching. White crystals sparkled where the collar joined the lining. Briggs pointed to the first photograph. Fireplace soot. From Samuel Grant's cottage, I asked. Almost certainly. How can you tell? It contains fragments of partially burned oak and cedar mixed with old coal smoke. Modern city fireplaces produce different residue. She handed me another photograph. This is river clay. The particles were dark brown with tiny red stones embedded inside them. It matches the mud outside the cottage. Exactly, Kramer frowned. That doesn't surprise anybody. Briggs smiled slightly. It should. Why? Because the clay is not resting on the cloth. She indicated a cross-section under the microscope. The particles are buried deep within the woven fibers. What difference does that make? If someone splashed mud onto the coat shortly before the dinner, most of it would remain on the surface, and brushing would remove it. Correct. But these particles were pressed into the fabric while the coat was being worn. I looked at the photographs again. The coat absorbed them. Over time, walking, bending, sitting, repeated movement, the fibers closed around the particles. Kramer removed his cigar. So Hale really wore it there. Yes, and for some time, yes. Briggs unfolded another laboratory report. The medicinal powder produced an even more interesting result. She handed Wolfe's name written across the request form. The powder contains traces of atropine, cotton fibers, and cardiostidine. My attention sharpened. The same drug from the prescription? The same. Kramer said. Could Hale have spilled it on himself? He could. Did he? I doubt it. Why? The powder appears beneath the inside collar and around both shoulder seams. She gently lifted the coat. Those locations collect particles only after prolonged wear. I nodded slowly. If someone carrying powdered medicine leaned against the coat, or embraced the wearer, or if the wearer carried medical equipment beneath the coat for several hours, exactly. Briggs turned the coat inside out. We also discovered soot beneath the lining. Inside the coat? I asked. Yes. How does soot reach inside? Only after repeated movement while the garment remains on the body. Kramer stared at the coat. So Hale didn't simply visit the cottage. No. He spent considerable time there, long enough for soot, clay, and medicinal powder to penetrate deeply into the cloth. The examination lasted another 30 minutes. Every new test contradicted Dr. Hale's carefully rehearsed account. The mud had not been collected while stepping briefly from a carriage. The soot had not settled during a hurried conversation. The medicinal powder had not brushed accidentally against the sleeve. The coat had lived through those places. When the laboratory finished, I telephoned Wolfe. He listened quietly. No surface contamination? He asked. No. Everything important is buried inside the fabric. Good. You expected that? I hope. Briggs says the coat must have been worn continuously from the cottage until the dinner, and afterward. She believes Hale never changed clothes. Did she mention cleaning? Someone brushed the outside thoroughly, but not the interior. No. Wolfe was silent for a moment, then he said, Bring the reports. When I reached the brownstone, Jonathan Reed, Dr. Hale, Inspector Kramer, and Martin Vale were already in the office. The atmosphere suggested that everyone wished someone else had accepted Wolfe's invitation first. I handed Wolfe the laboratory photographs. He examined them slowly. Finally, he placed the first photograph beside the hidden halcyon ledger. Dr. Hale, he said, you have repeatedly altered your account of yesterday afternoon. Hale answered quietly. I have. You claimed you visited your surgery, then Samuel Grant's cottage, then the charity dinner. Yes, you implied those visits were brief. I did. Wolfe touched the photograph showing soot buried beneath the wool fibers. Your coat disagrees. Hale looked at it without speaking. You remained inside the cottage long enough for fireplace soot to penetrate beneath the lining. Silence. You crossed the river path often enough for clay to become embedded inside the cloth. Still silence. You carried medicinal powder beneath your coat for several hours. Hale closed his eyes. I never denied carrying medical supplies. No, Wolfe replied. You denied carrying them continuously. Kramer leaned forward. So the timeline is false. Entirely. Wolfe nodded. The doctor's journey began well before the charity dinner. He remained at the cottage much longer than he admitted, departed wearing the same coat, traveled directly into public view, and later arrived at Edward Lawson's house. Vale shifted uneasily. I drove him. You drove him after leaving the cottage. Wolfe corrected. Yes. Did Dr. Hale remove the coat? No. At any time? No there. Wolfe spread the photographs across the desk. The laboratory has accomplished what witnesses could not. He looked at Kramer. People forget times. Yes, they confuse distances. Certainly, they misremember conversations. They do, but clothing remembers. No one spoke, Wolfe continued quietly. Fabric preserves journeys long after people attempt to forget them. His finger rested upon the enlarged photograph of river clay. The soot remembers the cottage. He touched another. The clay remembers the river path. Then the final image. The medicinal powder remembers the purpose of the visit. Hale looked toward the window. I tried to protect them. Grant and Mercer? Yes. And Margaret? You failed, I know. Wolfe regarded him steadily. No, Doctor. You failed only because someone else reached Lawson first. Kramer folded his arms. Then Hale isn't lying about everything. No. What is he still hiding? Wolfe closed the laboratory folder. He has told us where he traveled. But not why, exactly. The telephone rang, I answered. It was Sergeant Stebbins. His voice sounded unusually excited. We found Martin Vale's garage. So, there was another car inside, the Packard. No, a black sedan, the one Parsons saw. Probably. What else? Stebbins hesitated. We found dried river clay in the rear compartment. I looked toward Wolfe, and there are fresh bloodstains beneath the rear seat. I repeated the message. Martin Vale's face lost its remaining color. Wolfe did not even glance at him. Instead, he looked once more at the black evening coat folded neatly upon the desk. For 8 chapters, he said softly. Everyone has treated that garment as evidence against Dr. Hale. He lifted the coat carefully. It is something else entirely. What? I asked. The only honest witness. No one laughed. Outside, late afternoon sunlight reached through the office windows, touching the black wool with a faint gray sheen. The coat had traveled farther than any witness admitted. It had walked through the riverside cottage, carried the dust of an old fireplace, gathered the clay of forgotten ground, preserved the powder of a carefully prepared medicine, attended a respectable charity dinner, and finally stood beside Edward Lawson's body. It remembered every stop. Now all that remained was to discover who had planned the journey in the first place. Chapter 9. The dinner that created an alibi by 9 that evening, every surviving person connected with Edward Lawson's final hours had been placed somewhere in Wolfe's office. Inspector Kramer stood near the bookshelves. Dr. Andrew Hale occupied the red leather chair. Martin Vale sat beside Jonathan Reed, though neither appeared pleased by the arrangement. Ruth Mercer sat rigidly near the globe. Peter Collins had accepted the chair closest to the door. Samuel Grant and Peter Mercer were still missing. Wolfe entered after dinner, settled behind his desk, rang for beer, and inspected the company as though someone had delivered an assortment of defective machinery. We are not here to identify the murderer, he said. Kramer scowled. Then why are we here? To remove the lies protecting him. Wolfe placed 3 objects on his desk: the laboratory report on Hale's coat, the anonymous prescription, and Samuel Grant's black ledger. The accepted account of the evening begins at the Churchill Hotel, he continued. It should begin hours earlier at the Riverside Cottage. Hale lowered his gaze. At approximately 5:30, Wolfe said, Mr. Vale collected Dr. Hale from his surgery. An elderly man using the name Peter Morgan accompanied him. Peter Mercer, Kramer said. Yes, they crossed the river and went to Samuel Grant's cottage. Margaret Mercer was already there. Samuel Grant arrived soon afterward. Ruth Mercer's hands tightened. Wolfe looked at Hale. You were summoned because you had served as confidential messenger for the Halcyon Partners for many years. You recognized each survivor and could verify the old medical records. Hale nodded. Grant produced the original financial documents from the brown leather case. Wolfe continued. Mercer produced evidence concerning Robert Lawson's death. Margaret carried the unnamed prescription you had written. Reed said, "And Lawson?" "He had been invited to the cottage." A murmur crossed the room. Kramer said, "Lawson denied going there. Lawson denied many profitable facts." Wolfe touched the laboratory photograph showing river clay inside Hale's coat. Lawson arrived before Dr. Hale. A quarrel occurred. Lawson was injured, though not fatally. His blood remained on a bandage and upon the cottage floor. "Who struck him?" Kramer asked. "That has not yet been established." Wolfe turned to Vale. "You transported Lawson back to his house." Vale's face tightened. "I followed instructions." "Whose?" Vale looked toward Ruth Mercer, then away. Wolfe continued before Kramer could press him. "Doctor." Hale remained at the cottage to examine Peter Mercer and review the records. He then took the brown leather case containing Grant's original papers. Hale raised his head. "I was to deliver it to Lawson." "No," Wolfe said. "You were to recover it from Lawson after he signed a confession." Silence answered him. "The meeting failed," Wolfe continued. "Lawson left with the papers he could seize." Dr. Hale hurried to the charity dinner because his presence there had already been arranged. Kramer stared at Hale. "You went to dinner after all that?" "For 23 minutes, Wolfe said. "Long enough to enter through the main doors, greet the banquet manager, be seen by donors, and surrender the black coat at the cloakroom." "The dinner was an alibi," I said. "Not initially for murder," Wolfe replied. "For the cottage meeting. Hale intended to appear publicly at the hotel so that no one would place him beyond the river." Hale spoke quietly. "Lawson insisted I attend, because he expected to use you later," Wolfe said. He lifted the anonymous prescription. Earlier that afternoon, Edward Lawson had received 3 doses of cardiostadine. They slowed his heartbeat and weakened him without immediately causing death. Ruth Mercer said, "Margaret administered them." Wolfe looked at her. "That is what you wish us to believe." Her face stiffened. Kramer said, "The medical examiner placed the doses between 7:30 and 8:30. An approximation based upon the false assumption that Lawson remained healthy until evening. The first dose was administered at the cottage. The later doses were given after he returned home." "By whom?" Kramer demanded. "That question belongs to tomorrow's conclusion." Kramer objected, but Wolfe raised a hand. At 8:10, Mr. Vale removed an envelope from Hale's coat at the Churchill and delivered it to Lawson. At 8:40, Lawson's household sent an urgent message requesting Dr. Hale. Hale said, "I was told he had collapsed. You were meant to believe it." Wolfe turned toward the others. Dr. Hale collected his coat and left the hotel in full evening dress. Every guest who saw him depart believed he had spent the evening among them. The banquet manager remembered his entrance. The cloakroom attendant remembered his departure. The doorman remembered the urgent car. "The witnesses established his timeline," I said. "They established only his appearance." Wolfie's eyes moved from face to face. When Hale reached Lawson's house, Lawson had already been drugged, struck again, and placed beside the bronze horse. His heartbeat was dangerously slow. The visible head wound suggested violence. The medicine concealed the actual timing. Kramer said, "Hale arrived too soon." "Yes." The murderer expected Lawson to appear dead before the doctor examined him. Instead, Hale found a faint pulse and attempted treatment. "The doctor came too soon," I said. Lawson's dying words were not an accusation against Hale. They were a warning that Hale's early arrival had disrupted the plan. Hale leaned forward. "Then someone knew exactly when the message would reach me." "Certainly. And knew I would come from the dinner. Because the dinner was not merely your alibi, Doctor. It was the murderer's clock." Wolfe tapped the prescription. The guests became unwilling witnesses. They remembered Hale in evening clothes, heard of Lawson's emergency, and later saw the physician leave. Their honest recollections supported a dishonest sequence. Reed said, "But Hale still concealed the cottage to protect Grant, Mercer, and himself from exposure in the Halcyon fraud." "And the coat?" Kramer asked. The coat destroyed the timeline it was meant to support. Its soot, clay, and medicinal powder proved Hale had worn it continuously through every stage of the evening. Wolfe leaned back. The dinner created an alibi by placing a respected physician under bright lights at a convenient hour. But no banquet guest knew where he had been before entering, what he carried in his pockets, or why someone needed him visible. Kramer looked around the room. So one of these people planned the emergency call. Yes. Who? Wolfe reached for his beer. The person who administered Lawson's final dose, stole the leather case, killed Margaret Mercer, and threatened Peter Collins. Ruth Mercer rose. I will not sit here and be accused. Wolfe regarded her without emotion. You have not yet been accused, madam. Then why look at me? Because Martin Vale has looked at you 4 times whenever I mentioned the cottage. Vale turned pale. Ruth Mercer stared at him. Wolfe drank. Tomorrow evening, he said, Samuel Grant and Peter Mercer will join us. Then the false timetable will lose its final protection. Kramer stepped forward. You know where they are? Yes. Where? Wolfe closed his eyes. Hidden in the one place Edward Lawson's murderer believed no honest witness would ever search. No one moved. The dinner guests had believed they were attending a charitable evening. Instead, they had been arranged like hands upon a clock, each one pointing toward the wrong hour. Chapter 10. The doctor's evening coat. The final gathering began at 9. Samuel Grant sat beside Peter Mercer near the bookshelves, both older than their official histories allowed. Dr. Hale occupied the red leather chair. Ruth Mercer, Martin Vale, Jonathan Reed, Inspector Kramer, and Peter Collins completed the company. Wolfe placed the black evening coat across his desk. Edward Lawson was not murdered in the ordinary sense, he said. He constructed his own death. Kramer stared. He poisoned himself? Yes. Wolfe lifted the anonymous prescription. Lawson learned that Samuel Grant had survived and preserved the halcyon ledger. He also learned that Peter Mercer intended to expose the truth about Robert Lawson's death. Grant leaned forward. Edward tried to kill me 18 years ago. He struck you and left you near the river, Wolfe said. He believed the current had carried away both your body and his financial crimes. Grant nodded. I survived. Peter helped me disappear. Wolfe continued. Margaret Mercer arranged the cottage meeting. Dr. Hale attended as witness and messenger. Lawson came to recover the ledger, but Grant refused to surrender it without a signed confession. Hale said, Lawson attacked him, and you intervened, Wolfe replied. Lawson was injured. He then obtained part of the evidence and returned home. Kramer pointed at the prescription. When did he take the drug? The first dose at the cottage, after stealing the prescription from Margaret. The remaining doses at home. Why? To create a final weapon against Dr. Hale. Wolfe touched the coat. Lawson knew Hale would attend the charity dinner. He arranged an emergency message timed to bring the doctor from a crowded ballroom directly to his house. When Hale arrived in evening clothes, every witness would assume he had spent the entire evening at the hotel. He wanted Hale blamed, I said. Yes. Lawson struck himself with the bronze horse after taking the final dose. The drug weakened his heart, the blow supplied visible violence, and Hale's prescription supplied the culprit. Hale's face tightened. He expected me to find him dead. Precisely. But you arrived several minutes too soon. Lawson still had enough consciousness to realize his error. The doctor came too soon, Kramer murmured. Not an accusation, Wolfe said. A statement of failure, Ruth Mercer asked. And Margaret? Wolfe's expression hardened. Lawson killed her at the cottage when she tried to prevent him from taking the papers. Vale later moved her body under Lawson's orders. Vale lowered his head. Kramer stepped toward him. You'll make a full statement. Vale nodded weakly. Wolfe turned to Grant. The black ledger beneath the floorboard survived because Lawson never knew it existed. He believed the leather case contained every record. Grant said, it contained enough to destroy him, but not enough to prevent his final deception. Kramer frowned. Then why conceal everything, Hale? To protect Grant and Mercer, Wolfe answered for him. Dr. Hale knew that admitting the cottage meeting would expose 20 years of fraud, false death records, and silence. His lies made him appear guilty, but they did not make him a murderer. Wolfe lifted the coat by its shoulders. This garment supplied the truth. River clay proved Hale had crossed the cottage grounds. Fireplace soot proved he had remained inside. Medicinal powder proved he carried the prescription and supplies before the banquet. The dinner alibi collapsed, I said. Yes. Hale had not gone from surgery to dinner and then to Lawson. He had gone from the cottage to the dinner and then to Lawson. Once that hidden journey was restored, Lawson's plan became visible. Kramer looked at the coat. All that from dirt, Wolfe scowled. Not dirt, evidence. He laid the coat down. Men invent stories because they expect other men to forget. Lawson arranged witnesses, clocks, medicine, and respectable appearances. He believed a dinner jacket could transform a conspirator into an innocent physician and an injured man into a murder victim. Wolfe leaned back. But clothing has no vanity. It does not protect reputations, fear scandal, or alter its account under questioning. He looked around the room. An honest coat quietly records every road it has traveled. No one answered. Kramer took Vale away. Grant surrendered the ledger. Peter Mercer agreed to testify. Dr. Hale stood beside the desk and touched the torn sleeve of his evening coat. It nearly hanged me, he said. Wolfe reached for his beer. No, doctor, your lies nearly hanged you. He regarded the stained black fabric. The coat saved you.